It's Cinemassacre's Monster Madness Godzillathon.
After a decade-long rest, Toho finally brought their famous monster star back. This time with a bigger budget and modern look. After Godzilla evolved into a superhero, they decided to make him a bad guy again, a deadly force of destruction. A pivotal decision that would affect the rest of the series. It was released in Japan in 1984, simply titled Godzilla. But this was not a remake, it was a direct sequel to the original, ignoring everything that happened in between, but still taking place 30 years later. As far as the plot goes, there's nothing special. Godzilla just shows up and throws a fit. Same old stuff. The Godzilla suit, effects, and lavish miniature sets all look much more sophisticated, but still outdated by today's standards. There are moments when Godzilla looks real good and even scary, but some of the animatronic close-ups look like shit. One interesting thing to note is that the first attack in the movie is not from Godzilla, but sea lice. What the hell? The combat scenes with the army are pretty cool. The highlight is the new flying weapon, the Super X. There's also the infamous Cold War tension which was going on at the time. There's a scene where the Russians launch a missile at Godzilla, but in the US re-edit, they seem to deliberately launch the missile at Tokyo. Pretty fucked up. The 1985 US re-edit was distributed by Monster Master Roger Corman nonetheless. It also recast Raymond Burr, returning as his character Steve Martin from the original. But now, the actor Steve Martin was popular, so they simply refer to him as Mr. Martin instead. Overall, it's not as campy as the classics or as spectacular as the newer ones. It falls somewhere in between.
It's Cinemassacre's Monster Madness Godzillathon.
One problem with Godzilla 1985 is that Godzilla was on his own. He didn't have any monsters to fight. So for the sequel, Toho decided to hold a contest to write the plot and invent an original monster. As it turns out, it's a weird plot. Scientists find Godzilla's cells and combine them with that of a plant to create a giant plant monster which goes on a rampage. Well, then why'd you do that? You don't mix Godzilla cells with a plant unless you want trouble. This tends to be a very overlooked film in the series because Biollante isn't one of the classic Godzilla enemies, but it's definitely worth a look. It's strange, but original. Basically a bunch of tentacles with Venus flytraps at the ends and a giant crocodile mouth. Perhaps if they called it Godzilla vs. Little Shop of Horrors, it would have had more marquee value. Again, the combat scenes with Godzilla fighting the military are great spectacles to watch. They also bring in another new weapon, the Super X-2. Yeah, the usual planes and battleships get boring after a while, so it's always cool to see something new. But at last, I'd like to mention that this one was never released in the US. Theatrically. It was never released theatrically in the US, but it aired on cable television in the US, and it was released on VHS, English dubbed. Yes, I owned it, but it would be the last one that I'd own for a while, because following Godzilla movies throughout the 90s were not released in the US in any form whatsoever, not until the advent of DVD. However, they were available, fortunately subtitled, as special imports on VHS. Once DVD came around, every Godzilla movie saw a Western release. I hope that clears it up.
It's Cinemassacre's Monster Madness Godzillathon.
Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. This is one of the best of the entire franchise. It features a revival of Godzilla's most memorable adversary, it has outstanding action sequences, and an intriguing plot involving time travel. It also explains the origin of Godzilla. Of course, we know that he was mutated by some kind of nuclear radiation, but what we learn here is that he was originally a dinosaur, a Godzillasaurus. Why do we need to know that? Well, because it's important to the plot. Evildoers from the future come back before Godzillasaurus was mutated and moved him from his island, replacing him with 3 cute little creatures called Dorats. When the atom bomb goes off, it merges the little guys into Ghidorah, who's under the bad guys' control. So basically what they did was erase Godzilla from history and replace him with their own monster to destroy Japan. So the only thing that could stop Ghidorah is Godzilla, but unfortunately he doesn't exist anymore. But luck has it, a new Godzilla is created by a nuclear sub. So the good news is Godzilla's back, and the bad news is Godzilla's back. Supposedly he's bigger and badder than the last Godzilla, and he still causes destruction. I gotta tell you about my favorite scene. There's a Japanese war veteran who claims that his life was saved by the Godzillasaurus in World War II. To make a long story short, he gets all sentimental about Godzilla and thinks he's his friend.
Nobody ever got it that bad.
But there's another funny scene. When the time travelers go back in the 1940s, they're spotted by two American soldiers.
It did look like it was from another planet, but... Shall we report it, sir?
What, that we're being invaded by little green men from outer space? Let's just keep it as our secret. You can tell your son about it when he's born. Major Spielberg?
Oh, okay, so that's how Spielberg got the idea for Close Encounters in E.T. But of course, the big highlight are the fight scenes with Ghidorah. Good stuff. In the first battle, Godzilla blows his head off and fucking fries that bastard. So now that they got Ghidorah taken care of, the only problem is getting rid of Godzilla too. And the only thing that can stop him is Ghidorah, so hey, it's like they fucked themselves. The problem is reversed. So what do? They get Ghidorah back. It's like a continuous pattern. They replace the missing head with a robot one and equip it with all new weapons. And yes, this character is officially known as Mecha Ghidorah. It's one of the most memorable monster battles ever, and definitely one of my favorite Godzilla movies.
It's Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, Godzillathon.
Godzilla vs. Mothra. By now, Toho was making a Godzilla movie every year for the first half of the 90s. After bringing Ghidorah into the new series, they decided to follow it with the remake of Godzilla vs. Mothra. However, remake is a bad choice of words because it's a completely different storyline. Mothra still hatches out of an egg, starts in larva form, and goes into a cocoon before becoming her final form. That's all the same. But the twin fairies who Mothra guards explain themselves as the Earth's cosmos that keep nature in balance. And when humankind upsets the balance of the Earth, an evil Mothra appears named Batra. Batra is responsible for defending the Earth, but goes too far and ends up causing more destruction than necessary. So the good Mothra is sent in to straighten his ass out. Batra again starts as an armored caterpillar before cocooning into its final form. While the storyline generally revolves around Mothra and Batra, Godzilla of course joins in as well. Their first battle takes place in water in larva stage, and their final battle takes place in the city, both in full form. They all seem to be enemies, but at the end, Mothra and Batra team up against Godzilla. Kinda seems like the same old shit, but it's a pretty good entry in the series. It was so popular that Mothra became one of few characters to escape the Godzilla franchise and star in Rebirth of Mothra 1, 2, and 3. Originally starring in her own film, Mothra, it was fitting that she was able to break free again. Coming next, Toho would reinvent another one of their classic monsters.